Welcome to the Calzone. This episode is one of the Thesis interviews finding out how entrepreneurs are using their podcast to help their business. I hope y'all enjoy.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much for taking the
Of
time to do this.
course. I'm so glad you're doing this. It's a very interesting topic. And I think the way you're kind of really bringing the value of it is important because it's really just learning from each other, as dorky as it sounds, that people, grow.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about this. How'd you get into podcasting? How'd you get started?
Yeah. So it kind of came tangential from social media, which I used to educate. So I'm a cancer doctor and a blood specialist, and I realize, and the data's there, that there's a lot of inequity or bridges in care, or gaps in care, whatever term you want to use, to be really highlighted and talked about. So, like, meaning, like, depending on where you live, the color of your skin in the United States dictates if you get standard of care or gold criteria. And that's insane. And where else do you find people to be able to go back to their doctors and say, hey, like, I heard this thing, or should we need to check out this other thing? Then where people are really engaged more than anywhere else, which is
Right.
online, right? So
Right.
podcasts and social media and stuff. And so that's where it all started. And then that just basically turned into a podcast that was dedicated to sharing things to kind of democratize the information on very important stuff. One of the scariest things for cancer is not just the cancer itself, which is the scariest, but also having no idea. Am I
Yeah.
allowed to swear?
Oh yeah. Come
Okay.
on. Come
Just
on.
having like no idea on like what to expect, the why, like that stuff makes the whole process a lot more comfortable, I guess, as much as it could be. And that's
Yeah.
what the podcast is designed for.
Yeah. And I think that when you're in the dark on something, that fear also adds an added component where maybe you don't even get the same outcome as you would if you had, full trust and full
Right.
I mean,
Understanding.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I mean, it's like we all know how to walk. And so we're like, yeah, that's easy. And then if you do it in a cave that's dark, like suddenly it's way more challenging and way more uncomfortable. And I think
Right.
like cancer diagnoses are the same thing, where it's like, part of it sucks. Like I can't imagine. That's why I'm humbled every day when I do it. But then like just to know, like turn the lights on, know why and the what's and when you're supposed to be sick. And then
Yeah.
also building trust. I think that's what the podcast has done, because I think in some way, rightfully so, there's like this mistrust of, the medical field, especially since COVID. Like there were errors that showed the fallibility and how, again, just human even the medical system is. And if it's all patriarchal and like do this, do that, and don't ask questions, I think that's a very easy way to kind of, resist it. And I
Yeah.
think by having conversations like this and having the guests that I've had, it kind of humanizes it and sensitizes it to be more, received.
I believe that. You feel like trust has gone down and that you feel like there's a need for to bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think there's a good bit of um, data or whatever, like the stuff that are polling people in the last 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years. The trust has significantly gone down from a decade ago to 2 decades to 3 decades
Wow.
to the medical traditional system. And I think
Yeah.
part of that is like a lot of the misinformation. So online is like completely unregulated. Like you don't know if the person that's saying that if you take St. John's wort or you know eat this herb or whatever, that like it's just has amazing anti-cancer properties,
Yeah.
but it can't make the medical system billions of dollars, so that's why they're hiding it. And like, and you're not hearing anything from the medical community.
Is that
Like,
a story?
I mean, that's all the time. There's
Wow.
like billions and billions of dollars spent on herbals, supplements, snake oils, even literally and metaphorically.
Right.
And so that was part of the reason for my podcast too, is to like people have a people have it's understandable why people would resist trust if they get information in some capacity, even if it's incorrect, versus no capacity outside the physician room. Then it's like, what do you expect? Like, it's like we have a duty, I think, to be able to provide that information to combat a lot of the misinformation. And I
Right.
think the reason $1 billion is spent is because, like, they're like, well, they at least explain shit,
Right.
whereas the medical community, the way it's built right now, doesn't for the most part.
And when you show up in the doctor's office, they have, X number of calls they have to do in a day, and the hospital is pressure. There's money behind it. There's like a lot of pressure. And when you go through the podcast that you've archived, I don't know, 100 hours of recording, and there's no way to cover all of that in that amount of time. So like the degree to which you have to educate because you need the person to be on the same page with you versus you know, the amount of time that you have to spend with them in that moment
Yeah.
while you're trying to troubleshoot and could it be this, could it be that? I could imagine that's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure, and the healthcare system is just not built to educate. Like, there's no billing code for that. Like, that 15 minutes, I'm like having to deal with the toxicities and the labs and explain what we're doing, why we need fluids and potassium. And like, it is just not made for it. So when your
Right.
doctor's talking to you and teaching you, that's time away from their kids at the end of the day, because they're not writing the note as soon as they get out. Like, that 15-minute visit is also to write and document everything. So I'll have all my notes after I put the kids down. And so does my wife as a cancer doctor. Like, we're just doing our notes once the kids are asleep because the education is important. So
Your wife's a doctor as well?
she's also, yeah, blood and
Oncology
cancer.
as well?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. How did
And
y'all meet?
we met in med school.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Here at LSU?
We met at LSU Med School. Yeah,
LSU Med School.
yeah,
Unbelievable.
yeah,
One thing I really like about especially the TikTok account that you have and Instagram account that you have is that it's really like detailed, on point, you know, fact-based learning
yeah,
that you grab people with dance moves and with the music. And so it's like it marries together the interest and the fun with the actual, you know, medical advances and news and it's like we're celebrating this new medical
yes,
development. You want to root for it.
right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love that.
I
Like,
like you want it to be. You want there's just this culture where it's like it's almost unrelatable. Like, it's like the medical community and us and like a non-medical, and that's insane. It's like, I'm obviously, I hope I'm not normal by any means. Like, I'm very weird, but like, it's like I'm also just a person, and I think doing that kind of bridges that trust. It makes, relatability, and truthfully, like, that's how information gets out there. It's crazy, but I've had, 2 years of just like hours of just talking to the camera and trying to educate, and they'll get 1,000 views versus a dance with the same content that will get 2.1 million in 72 hours. I mean,
yeah,
it's insane.
right. 2.1 million in 72 hours. And those people, they all like are at least exposed to the idea that they could be on the same side as the medical community. That's
Yeah.
like right now, I feel like in our society, especially in the United States, less so in Amsterdam where I'm in school, but in the United States right now, there's this sort of like grouping of society where it's like the medical community, the this community, the that
Yes.
community. And it sort of seems like it's very easy to other another group
Yeah.
and put them, oh, they're in that, they're there, there's walls,
Yeah.
we're not the same.
Right.
And that's a problem. That's like some tribal, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's truly isolating what at the end of the day are like collaborative, man and womankind, humankind efforts. You're
Right.
just isolating it.
Right.
And I think podcasting, for example, is a way to completely bring the most natural thing to build community, which is discussion, eye contact,
Yeah.
like relatability. When you're listening to that podcast, especially if it's a video podcast or even the conversational, I just believe that there's an inherent comfort or familiarity that comes with the mode of communication that we've had, for thousands of years since we're nomadic,
Absolutely.
which is convo, talking, shooting the shit, whatever you want to call it. It just makes it more relatable.
Yeah. What have you learned through your podcast about, you know, like where has that brought you? How about this one?
Golly.
What did you learn that you didn't expect that surprised you over
Yeah.
the journey of podcasting?
Yeah. I think, I think, well, let's back up for a second, I guess, because, my story's always been, and I mean, I'm a doctor, I'm triple specialized, but I went to like, LSU, right? Louisiana State University. So I always consider myself like online as like the blue collar doctor, like that, like obviously is sufficient and good practice, but also didn't go to Harvard, right? And so, or what I say, a lay person with a medical degree is sometimes what I call myself. And I have this podcast now where I really every day to this moment, I'm like, I have no business sharing air with these people. That's how I used to feel. And the only reason I don't feel that way is only because of how they've given me feedback, which is crazy. I've had a Pulitzer Prize winner that Siddhartha Mukherjee, he wrote Emperor of All Maladies, that I read, when I was 15. And like I'm on like he's my guest. Like it's crazy. And then what he's doing next. And I've had, the director of Google Applied AI, Scott Penberthy, the CMO of WebMD. I mean, and the thing, I guess, to answer your question is like, what has surprised you the most is it's unbelievable what happens at the end of that podcast, especially when I turn it off. Like after that 60-minute, conversation, I think it just falls back to that relatability or that natural gravitation we have of just like
Mhm.
shooting the shit with somebody and what that does. Like, it makes
Yeah.
you invested, even if they're a kind of an asshole. Like, you just care about them more than you would if you were watching a presentation. And I think that just goes back to humanism. I think it's something that is the beauty of all of us shared, regardless of our color of our skin or our citizenship.
Yeah.
You go back to that with conversation. I think
Yeah.
that's the word that really, in some ways, is lost and distanced with having all this like fancy tech stuff. That, like, I have some of the amazing relationships with my guests now that, again, I still to this day believe I have no business, talking to.
Wow. Wow. So you built relationships because you were sitting down to just have a conversation with a person, and then unexpectedly over the course you stayed in touch, you
Yeah,
built that. That's amazing.
it's amazing.
Has that led to any I know that you're involved in a lot of other projects as well. And has that led to any inspirations for projects or collaborations
Oh my
or
gosh. So Jason Fung, he's a nephrologist in Canada. And that's what podcast allows, the barriers, right? He has a busy clinic. He's a nephrologist. He wrote the cancer code, the diabetes code, the obesity code. I mean, billions probably of copies of books sold. And so we were like kind of working on a book, together. So we're co-authoring one because he's like, oh, I need
wow.
an oncologist. And then Scott Penberthy, the director of Google Applied AI, him and I started a company called OncoAI, which is like a startup with some mutuals, Doug Flora, and that's to like bring AI in an understandable way to how it can help healthcare. So those are two, I guess business ish, like if you want to think of it that way, collaborative things that came out of just two of the guests. But
How can it be applied to healthcare?
how's that? What's that?
What are some of
AI?
the ideas with AI? Yeah.
I
If you can disclose that, I don't know.
no, yeah, easily. It's that in itself is its own podcast. But very simply, the way I put it is, and that's another thing that came out of the podcast. Now I'm speaking again as this LSU kid. Again, I'm working on my master's at these kind of higher institutions, but like, why and how am I keynoting at these major conferences or giving like, survivor talks and it's just very humbling. But I
I
think
could
it's
give you
the
the answer on that.
relatability.
Yeah, you're relating to people. That's what it is. It's
I'm an
the
empath, and I think that's what that's what anyone can feel when they have a discussion with a human. Like, you're committed now. I'm sorry. Like, you and I have to be homies. Like,
Come
it's like
on.
this is something that comes out of it. It's like you get connected. You know what I mean? You get invested. But what was the question you asked previously?
Yeah, so you said that you were doing the AI,
Oh, AI. Yeah.
right?
The way I explain it is very, simply and I think accurate, which is when somebody gets a cancer diagnosis, right? If it's a loved one, and say like you have money or means, the first question you ask is, who do we go to? And the reason you ask that is, who's the most experienced, right?
Okay.
That's like if you have melanoma, God forbid, or if you have breast cancer, like, we need to go to the specialist. Like, that's like the best in the country. And MD Anderson, Memorial Sloan. Why? Because of their experience. Because of, when you distill down experience more, because of their pattern recognition. How many patterns have they seen? And what patterns have they recognized as
Mm,
far as outcomes, treatments, what to do, toxicities? That's why you want to go to the experienced oncologist.
mhm.
AI is a data querying, it's an observation, it's an aggregate of experience and pattern recognition. Like, that's literally what it is, or pattern recognition at least. So when you
Yeah.
have AI implementation, you're able to recognize patterns logarithmically larger and higher than what a human brain can. It's like taking the expert in breast cancer, all 10 or 20 of them, aggregating all their experience and putting a log of 3. That's what AI does. So now when I break it down and say, well, this patient had 1.5 lymph nodes involved or had this receptor status. Now suddenly I can make sense of a lot more patterns distilled down than I can in any older way of like documenting this stuff and making sure
Right.
it's not confounded and blah blah blah. That's AI.
Right. So there's just a higher computational pattern and maybe more accurate pattern recognition or
Yeah.
more. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just
Okay.
it's the same way as asking what's the difference between a floppy disk and like obviously a crazy hard drive, right? Or a human brain. It's like it's just the capacity, the bandwidth to make so many more observational analyses on a series of events
Right.
or things. So like now you can use AI if you're doing editing, like with podcasts. So I use a lot on my podcast stuff and some of my animation. They're learning models. And so they're learning how you edit everything. And then
Right.
they're able to like give you at least a baseline, offload 70% of the upfront annoying work that's very easy. Obviously, I snip out when I'm stuttering and all this. They just do all that. They did that not because you inputted the data on it's not like algorithms. It's because it just learned you, and then you tell it when it did something wrong, and it learns you better and better and better. That's AI.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So it's like a diagnostic tool as well, where you can use it. Is that am I getting that right? Where you can use it to help inform diagnoses when you put in people's data, and maybe it'll tell the doctor, "Oh, watch out, this is a potential risk."
Yeah. So I don't know about diagnostic, but maybe the word you think is prognostic. Like what's
Okay.
their outcome going to be? Is it bad? Is it good? We noticed that if it lights up on a PET scan brighter around the outside, that it has a bad mutation called EGFR. Like it's just making connections. It's powered AI in general, whether it's in medicine or not, is making connections that aren't limited by just one human brain, right? They have a huge neural
Yeah.
network. And that's why you can do it for anything. Like anything. Like when you wake up, like we do espresso and all this stuff. If we had a learning model of AI here, they would know when we were getting up, like they would turn on the lights, they would like just because they realize this happens 97% of the time,
Mhm.
and the setting on the heat instead of all this stuff that we're spending our minutes in this world. You have a finite, I have a finite. I think AI can really, I know all the bad stuff that people say, but it could at the very least just save you time to just live and have conversations and grow and all that stuff.
Right. I'm a total optimist on AI. I really believe, like, I understand why people are scared, like, and it's new and there's a potential for danger. And like, I understand, I'm
Yeah.
with it, but at the same time, the potential for growth. And also it's like, just because you're using AI to be able to, as a prognostic tool or as a way to, for the house and minutes of the day and all that, that doesn't mean that you're making AGI. That's like a
Right.
fundamentally different thing right there.
100%.
And so, like, I feel like that needs to be communicated better to the public about, what are we actually talking about when we say this word AI?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Exactly. And that's
Yeah.
why the Google director of applied AI and I this morning were texting that we're going to make a book on that,
That's
and again
amazing.
came out of the podcast. Like
That's
the number of
amazing.
things that came out of the podcast are insane. White House series roundtable, like the White House has these roundtables, and I was on one with like 7 other people. That was the healthcare leaders and social media roundtable. Again, from podcasting and basically
Yeah.
communication online presence, like which is what your thesis is on. It's like, where is the utility? I think part of it is very importantly learning how to pivot. Like you just got to listen to, like just on where you should go next or what's next. Like if you're too brazenly, obstinately, stubbornly pit bull style, like trying to force something, like you're shutting off a lot of things that are telling you to go left, right, up or down. I think that's a universe in general. I think all of our purpose is we're just like, well, why isn't anything I'm trying to do working out or I? It needs to be like less I and what am I positioned to do? What is the world like? Why did this conversation happen with this person? Like that's how the whole podcast started actually. Some guy messaged me on LinkedIn and was like, hey, we want you on our podcast. He was very aggressive and not really like, empathetic about a lot of things. And then I heard from the CEO because he was just kind of in charge of their PR stuff. And the CEO texted me one night and was like, hey, we're trying to do this really amazing thing to help patients, which they are. Like they're really helping patients. And he's like, would you consider it? And I just texted him back and I was like, look, your gentleman that you got to do this is very polarizing. And, for your sake, because I did a deep dive on your company, like it's amazing. It's a great tool and you're doing something altruistic, but you need to, consider not having this guy. And that's all I'm going to say, but I can't get involved.
Right.
That turned into him being one of my biggest mentors over the last 2 years. Like him powering my podcast actually completely without a sponsorship logo or anything to say, hey, I believe in you. We're going to do this big thing. That like all
Wow.
from a LinkedIn message.
And that's from Target Cancer.
That became Target Cancer Podcast. And that's
Wow.
Mika Newton, the CEO, who's such an amazing guy and has shaped me in so much that literally sponsored the podcast just to get people educated on cancer. And their company basically is a way to get all their healthcare records, like with the health web all in one place, because there's so many breaches in care because somebody doesn't have the fucking records. Like it's insane. Like you don't know what their labs are at baseline because they go to some other institute and they're in your ER. You don't know when their last chemo was because it's 3 a.m. And that happens all the time everywhere. And so XCures is like, yo, patients shouldn't have to pay. Like, why can't they just have all of their information in one place?
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's one example.
But
But
that's needed. That's like step one. Let's communicate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get that communicated from doctor to doctor. That's got to be a
right.
thing.
Like, why wouldn't, like, when I say that, you're just like, what do you mean? That's
Yeah.
not, like, that's not a thing.
We have the internet, right?
Right. Exactly. If you're lucky, people are hearing this like, what do you mean? Everyone has everything. If you go to an academic center, which is 15% of the United States,
Yeah.
85% is in the community. Yeah, the academic center is everything. But in a community like Baton Rouge, even the ER I'm going to is not necessarily speaking the same electronic medical record
Yeah.
system as the clinic I go to for my chemo.
Right. And then I'm in Europe, living in Europe. So I bet,
Yeah,
across the
exactly.
country,
And
that's
now
probably
you don't have it
another
at
one.
all. But
Right.
if you have your extras or there's other people doing it and they're all AI powered, now you log in, you can say, this is all my baselines. I just, God forbid, got in an accident. This is where, like, now you know everything. And
Yeah.
there's just so much to be done in the tech space. And that's what my podcast is target cancer podcast, but like the new and updated technologies to hopefully the faster the word gets out, the sooner we can
Yeah.
optimize them.
Yeah. I noticed it's called target cancer.
Yeah.
Is the target, it seems specific. It seems like everything you're doing is a very precise goal.
Yeah, I love puns. I
Yeah.
love puns. I love play on words. Uh, Target cancer is because the whole concept of targeted or precision medicine,
Mhm.
which is really the way that everything should be done and will be done ideally. But yeah, so it's target cancer. So it's not like shotgun systemic chemo stuff that still has a very big role and works, but really refining, the way we look at things. And
Okay.
that's why these guests are just again, everyone buys into it. They're like, let's share information.
Mhm.
Like I've had a few people that are world leaders on metabolic strategy, meaning like, let's tackle this whole sugar thing. Because like on social media, like I see that a lot. And I'm not trained on that, right? Like I have again 15 years of all this stuff. So I'm like, I want to learn. So I'm gonna get the specialists that tell me why sugar does it
Yeah.
feed cancer or invite cancers and things like that. And now my mind's blown. And now that I've shared, I mean, that one with Dr. Seafried has something like 500,000, views. And the other one I had recently with Chrissy, she's a radiation oncologist. It's not popular. That's the one thing is it's not always popular to be the person that says like, do we need to pause and just see like, are we considering everything? Are we getting narrowed in our
Yeah.
thinking? Am I watching Fox News all the time or MSNBC all the time?
Right.
Again, it's a metaphor for life.
Of course.
Pause, reevaluate where you're like fostering your time and what you're receiving and think, is the version of me today, like, am I maximizing myself? I think that goes for anything in life, even in the brain.
Yeah, I believe that. What do you think? Do you think that sugar is playing a role in that way? Is it a metabolic question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So in that sense, at first, that's what social media is so humbling. I learned very early on these radical statements. Like I used to like be sad or get my feelings sort of like, oh, it's a pharmacy industry. It's all for money. And I'm like, okay, wait, that is true, but it doesn't mean it's not helpful. So like, it's like there's some truth behind every hyperbolic or radical statement. And so what I've made my passion is to explore it, explain how it became this radical
Okay.
understanding to debunk it to a degree, but then also explain like the truth behind it. And I think that's the end of the day, that's common ground. That's how you don't polarize people. It's how you bring them together. It's like you're right, they're right, and this is why. Like, but let's not go crazy. So in this case, very simply, does a cancer require sugar? Yes, it requires glucose, right? But so do your other cells. And the thing is, can you starve a cancer completely by reducing glucose? Not necessarily, because they can use amino acids, different amino acids. But Siddhartha Mukherjee, the Pulitzer Prize winner I told you that wrote Improbable Maladies, like he's now studying, well, what if we rob also that amino acid? But the biggest thought on why we have so much cancer and so young today, more than ever before, is directly related, not necessarily to the sugar, but because of the insulin that always rises to spikes that are absolutely fucking absurd compared to anything that a human body has been used to 50 years ago, 100 years ago.
And that's a response of a lot of sugar over a
Ingestion.
lot of time.
No, at that moment.
Okay.
Like I love like a McDonald's hot and spicy or like a Mexican pizza. I still eat it, even though I know it's like fucking terrible for me. But I eat it because it tastes good. And that spike with the amount of preservatives and fats, all this stuff, it is just absolute overload for our bodies compared to the last 1,000 years, right? Like you can't go at 8,000 RPMs in a gear and just expect it to go faster. Like you're maxing out, so stop hitting the gas and shift up, right?
Right.
And it's the same thing. It's like we're doing that to ourselves over and over. Insulin's a growth factor. People forget that. It's like so it says grow, grow, grow. Like it's a growth factor. What does cancer mean at its root word? Actual root word, Latin, means unregulated cell growth. So when you look at our diets, and you see how much insulin. Now we're just saying like, oh, hit them more and do some more insulin, do more. It's not enough. They're resistant.
Yeah.
Coincidentally enough, these are the people that get cancer by far the most.
Right.
Are diabetics and people that like and have obesity. And I think there's a big faculty of thinking this is all because we're just circulating growth factor
Yeah.
nonstop, which is inviting a tumor to stop listening, which is a normal cell. When it stops listening, now it's become a cancer. Because your cancer is your normal cells.
Right.
They just don't listen to your body anymore.
Right. How much of a I don't know the answer to this. How much of a focus is being put on preventative medicine, establishing baselines?
Not enough.
Not enough.
Not nearly enough.
Okay. I saw this company, and I'm blanking on the name of it. It's killing me. But I saw this company. They were doing blood tests where it was like $500, and you could get like all these different blood panels where it's like you get a baseline, so that one day if there was a problem, they can go back to that baseline and compare.
Mhm.
Is that kind of thing useful? Is that something that people should
We're
think
headed
about?
there. We're headed there. So there's one that's called Grail gallery test. That one people mistake. They like take it and they're like, oh, it's negative. I don't have cancer. But somehow they think that means they can't get cancer. That one is just molecular. It's very like it's very sensitive, but that's for any active cancer. Then there's genetic testing where you can check like 50 or 80 to see, do I have a predisposition or do I have like a something that's already screwed up that will foster a cancer? When that's negative, people say, oh, it means I can't get cancer. 90% of cancers in the US are not due to a genetic mutation that you were inherited with. It's something that happened in your lifetime. It has nothing to do with your parents' genetics or your families. So anyone listening is like, that's a big one I do a lot on podcasts and social media. I'm like, yo, just because you don't have family history, 9 out of 10 people that have a cancer diagnosis is behavioral. That's why you go back to the talk on, well, why are so many people getting pancreatic and liver and gallbladder cancers now way earlier? So what changed? Did the genetics change of humans?
No.
No. So that's why 90% of it is from what you're eating. What did change here in the US is like the amount of diabetes, the amount of
Yeah.
like, sugar. And I'm terrible with my diet. Like the only reason like and I still struggle with my weight, not infrequently, but it's just I don't have time to eat. So I could definitely do better. But it's to the point where in Africa, we found people that were never getting colon cancer. And we're like, they have a gene. They have something that like they can't get colon cancer. Let's study them. And then you
Okay.
brought them here and they all started getting cancer just by
Right.
eating the American diet, like after like 10
Right.
years. So that's how, relevant it is.
So diet seems to be like one of the number one factors.
Diet, yeah, and age, really.
Diet and age.
Yeah.
Okay.
Over time, you have more exposure to things, right? Like toxins, the insulin in your own body, undetected mutational errors, your immune system wanes. Like you've beat cancer already, I've beat cancer already. Our immune system take care of us all the time. We've all beat cancer if you can understand what I'm saying right now. So yeah, but diet seems to be one of the biggest things.
Yeah. And so you say target cancer, right? So like, what does targeted medicine look like?
So targeted medicine, the way we used to think about cancer and still do, of course, is it's very like archaic. It's like, let's get a piece of it, let's stick it on a slide, let's color it a couple of colors. Oh, it looks like small cell, non-small cell, whatever. Now we're not just looking at the tumor and what receptors or proteins it has. Targeted therapy and molecular therapy and NGS or next generation sequencing, these are all terms to mean you're going down to the blueprint of what are the features that make this thing really fucked up, excuse my language.
Okay.
And they're like, oh shoot, that switch that we know turns on growth on all of our normal cells, it's stuck, so there's a mutation, so it doesn't shut off. Or this thing that says blow up, you're retired, you're old, you're look sketchy, that blow up button doesn't work. So now we're able to really tell what the tools are, and then now we have therapies and we're building therapies to attack that tool. Oh, it's that light switch. Well, instead of just shotgunning you with chemo, which is a poison, right? So on podcasts and social media, I'm like, all right, it is a poison.
Yeah.
It's a poison because it works when things replicate. It injures it to where it dies. What replicates the fastest? Cancer, by
Right.
far. So yeah, the fast cells on your body that replicate, they take a hit. Your hair cells, your gut cells, so you're nauseous. You lose hair with chemo, but they grow back, and in the process, we know that the cancers, every one of them that was replicating fast, died. So now you've killed every cell versus targeted therapy, which is a whole different concept of like not just a generalized poison, but really, honing in on a receptor. But
Because
remember,
that receptor that turns on or off, you find out that protein or
is
that switch,
driving
whatever it
that
is,
cancer.
and you hit that thing.
Yep.
And how do you hit? Like, what's an example of something that can hit that thing?
So I'll use breast cancer because everyone knows, about usually about receptor status, right? They're like, are you hormone positive or negative? The other one is HER2. So those are the three receptors you always talk about breast cancer around the world. Hormone positive, it's not really targeted therapy, but when it's hormone positive, what do? We give you a pill to wipe out your hormone because we know it's a mouth and likes to eat hormone.
Yeah.
And so when you cut out estrogen, which I think is debilitating, mentally, emotionally, and people need to talk about that more. But then that works because the cancer starts to starve and die. So we didn't really target the receptor that's estrogen receptor. We just wiped out away all the food. But with HER2, the third receptor, that's like the thing you prayed you didn't have in like the late 80s. Like that shit is aggressive. It's like a fast multiplier. It was so sinister. Now you pray you have the receptor and not be triple negative. If you had to pray between one of them.
Okay.
Why? What changed?
We found a way to attack that
Attack
one
the
thing.
receptor. And that's why like trastuzumab, or in the States we call it Herceptin, and pertuzumab, these antibodies go and attack HER2. And now suddenly you have these insane like resolutions of the cancer because you're able to target the thing that made it really screwed up.
How do they do that on a chemical level? Like, is it some kind of electrons match? Is
So
there a
these
chemical
abs,
match?
like these MABs, they're antibodies. So
Okay.
like basically they go and they look for that HER2 and then they like link up
Are they
and
living?
they're like holding
Is an
hands.
antibody a living thing?
No, it's not living. It's just like a protein, basically.
Okay.
And then
And it fits somehow.
yeah,
Somehow
it
there's
fits exactly. Yeah, it just like links up. It's like HER2. Like I know what that HER2 looks like. A crown from France that like pokes up like this. So I'm gonna make something that covers up exactly like a puzzle piece, and then it has a chemo on it, and that chemo then injects into the cell itself.
no way.
Yeah,
God bless modern medicine. Oh my
it's
God.
wild.
I broke my wrist snowboarding this February. It was
Oof.
like I started the run and then I wake up and it was like 22 minutes later and it was like 90 degrees and 90 degrees. And I was like, that doesn't look right. Like,
Right.
what are we gonna do about this?
Yeah.
Get to the bottom of the mountain, boom, whole story later. 1 week later, surgery was done. My wrist was looking straight, and I was like, oh my God, are we gonna be good? Now I'm like
Unbelievable.
that. Like, no, I can lift stuff, like it's back,
Right.
And I was just so amazed because I thought in that moment I didn't know, what was possible,
Yeah.
what wasn't possible. And you have this fear where like, can you fix me?
Yeah.
And when people show up and they're like, I have cancer, what do I think when I hear cancer? I hear like death.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm dying.
Yeah.
Like that's what I think. And just that there's
It's
this
just not the
way-
case like necessarily anymore. Like we're all dying,
Yeah.
right? But now you can live with a stage 4 cancer for years, potentially, depending on the cancer. Years with no detectable disease. Like have a good quality of life, And that's a big reason for my podcast. I don't want people not to get screened or not go to the doctor because like if I have it, just let me die. I'm like, even if there was a pill that had no side effects essentially and just would make it go away for 3 or 4 years.
Right.
Like, and that's
Right.
and that mistrust is because it used to be really shitty. Like we only had heavy hitting chemos, and it's just not the case anymore.
How does it feel to be in the room with the person and they're scared and you're showing up and you have to talk to them? What is that moment like?
I go into the room with one responsibility. That's to make them feel more empowered, or again, the cave light on, like more empowered when they leave than when they went in. Do they understand their process? Because I feel like the more you are empowered. You're like, I understand you. Fuck you. Just
Yeah.
like the cancer. And then all of a sudden you can make someone excited about a treatment. Not that if it's appropriate, rather than feared if they didn't know that side effects are pretty low, that they're not going to lose their hair, they're not going to be nauseous, they don't have to take it off for work. Like those could be all the things that they're thinking and not ask. And if that's the case and I can tell them that, I make sure to highlight the shit out of any good news or good factor. I think in medicine, we don't do that enough. We love and make sure we have to about the bad stuff. This could be bad. This could kill you. It could have all these side effects, but there's no like, by the way, this is why this is really fucking great that you have HER2, but rather than triple negative, because the response rates are 85%. You can't even see the disease when you do it before a curative surgery. Like we don't hit that hard. And so that's what I take as my responsibility. Can I let you also know the things that are something to be like, feel like in a weird way, fortunate about?
Right. Do you feel like their mindset when they leave the room impacts their outcomes, their healing
There's data
outcomes.
that shows mindset impacts outcome.
Wow.
Yeah, like how they feel, optimism, even like prayer and stuff. But in general, that's a data proven analytic, which again, there is no room in the healthcare system that actually fosters that.
Yeah.
Like that is a charitable thing that your doctor's doing for the most part, like, under circumstances where they're having to pull something from somewhere else of their personal life because like there's no billing model for that.
Right.
And that's where I think having evergreen information, meaning like the stuff lives online, the stuff lives in a podcast, you can revisit it, you can hear it a second time where you want to call the doctor and ask him again, you feel bad, or you do, all that stuff. That's the beauty of podcasts and like media and media is that it's evergreen, it's revisitable, and it's democratized because now it doesn't matter if you're not in my radius to treat you that way. I can give you the good news to hopefully like make you feel a little more either optimistic or whatever about that,
Yeah.
that thing that if you didn't know, you'd be a little more discouraged.
All right. All right. Last question on medicine, then we'll switch gears.
Yeah.
All right. I'm 24. I want to have a healthy, great life in general, not just about cancer, but also in terms of like, I'd rather not,
Yeah.
like what are things that I could do, tests now, or lifestyle activities, or screening, or walk me through what the mindset of a 24-year-old through a 50-year-old should be thinking about in terms of their health and especially as related to cancer.
Love that question. So one of the most important things to realize is cancer and the things that make cancer a higher risk are very similar to the ones that make higher risk for strokes, heart attacks, those kind of things. They
Okay.
overlap for a reason. When COVID came, what was everyone saying? It's like the people that don't do well are the people that are diabetics, overweight, have a heart
Yeah.
history. Like they all overlap. There was a big study that came out earlier this year that if you do, I'm such a degenerate. Like I don't even do this, even though I know this stuff, I don't do it. So that's why I empathize a lot. If your doctor makes you feel like, why aren't you doing it? I told you it's good for you. Like they're not very compassionate. Like it's easier said than done. But strenuous exercise, 4 minutes a day. They looked at two cohorts. People that did both cohorts weren't really working out significantly. They did their day to day, like me, like go to work and all this stuff. They didn't actually like dedicate workout.
Mm-hmm.
Half they continue their life, run around the kids, do everything. The other half, they made them do strenuous activity for 4 minutes. What does strenuous mean? Get your heart rate to like 150, 180.
Mm-hmm.
They had about a 28% decreased chance of cancer over the next several years, incidence rate than the other one. All things the same, the 4 minutes of strenuous exercise. And that in itself is because there's no doubt when somebody just says work out more, like, what's that mean? You want to like really challenge your body to like have to tack up, like the tachycardic, meaning like get your heart rate up. And if you're short-winded going up the stairs, I got short-winded this morning. I used to work out a lot. It's just been in the last year. And I was like, my heart rate at my mom watch is like it's 100, bro. And I was like, I just literally like bent down to wipe my legs and moisturize. And I'm like, this is pathetic. I'm so deconditioned. So that conditioning is very important. And I tell my patients, I used to do like personal trainer stuff too in residency. I tell them I would rather you work out 10 to 20 minutes a day than 2 days a week for an hour and a half. Because at the end of the day, your lifetime is your lifetime. So if 2 out of 7 days, 2/7 of a week, you actually did something, but 5 out of 7 you didn't, even though it was 90 minutes,
Yeah.
like it's not the same.
Right.
So the key is regularity. Like what is the thing that's like sustainable and regular? Little pulses of things,
Right.
right? Like eating really well for 8 months, but it was like fucking terrible. And now you're just like shit eating for 2 years. That doesn't do nearly as much as it just quote unquote cheating. It shouldn't be called cheating, but indulging
Right.
1, 2, 3 days. Who cares? Just be more conscientious of what you're doing. So the strenuous exercise, and then you have to introduce. I know it's whatever, but cruciferous vegetables,
What's a
like
cruciferous vegetable?
like just things that are like very leafy and green
Mhm.
and all this stuff. That is unquestionably a thing. Like if
Mhm.
I have one friend that I'm seeing later today. Like he just eats meat, and I'm like, bro, you can't just keep doing that. Like you've got to introduce like vegetables and all this stuff. Those are the diets that I told you in Africa where they weren't getting cancer. that was kind of one of the reasons why. It's just because of this cruciferous vegetable stuff. A third thing is don't be a fucking picky eater. There's a lot of data that shows that the reason that allergies and like sensitivities and stuff are coming up in kids in America is because we're so narrow now. Everything's like use your bacterial, antibacterial soap. I only eat chicken nuggets. Your immune system is as robust as what it's learning in childhood and as it gets older. So if you only eat chicken nuggets and mac and cheese, and you're not eating the nuts and the legumes and the cruciferous vegetables and eating something that's Thai, like some people are just like, oh, that sounds Chinese. I don't think I'll like that. I'm like, just because of the name? Like you haven't even tried it? Like having that dynamic adaptation really kind of flexes and teaches your gut to have a healthy microbiome. And
Okay.
one thing that's really underrated or underappreciated is the relationship of your gut to like psychiatric health, emotional health, psychology, and immune system. It's such a fucking thing. And I just don't know why it's not
Of
talked
your
about enough.
gut to
Your
your
gut,
psychology.
all of it.
So the bacteria, or I don't even know
Yes.
what words. It's
Yes.
bacteria
Yes.
are linked to how you're feeling.
Yeah. Over time, like your stress, your cortisol, your fatigue, this non-specific stuff where you know something's wrong, but somebody's saying, like, no, you're crazy. Like a lot of that sometimes, not a lot, but plenty can be because of your gut microbiome. That's like the bacterial stuff. That distribution is very important. So people that are taking antibiotics all the time, like, sometimes they end up having, why am I losing my hair? Why am I, fatigued or washed out? Having a healthy gut, we know is intimately linked with emotions and immunity is directly related to cancer.
Right.
And it's just really important. That's why if you think about it, because you asked a question, well, why does emotion do gut? What happens when you get super anxious, like super scared or super excited or whatever? You get what we call a visceral reaction. Layperson would call it butterflies or stomach knots. Tell me why that organ is the thing that like can actually have an emotional, there's an axis there that exists between
Mhm.
your gut and psychiatrics, emotionally, and everything. It's very important, and we don't think about it nearly enough.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's amazing. And any screening things, when should you start thinking
you have to
about
do all the screening things.
all the screening
Yeah,
things all the
your
time?
primary doctor should always tell you what you have to do to get screened.
Wow.
They're all standard on age. Now, with the Google director, what we're working on is like he way more with this world leader Lee Hood. It's called phenomics. It's like, are we really doing it the right way by just having a biologic age? Like, is that the best metric? Because a
Okay.
45-year-old can be very different than another 45-year-old, right? And so they're looking at things that are actually having to do with like the changes in the body physiologically. There's gonna be a day where we have implantable stuff that tells you that things are under duress and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But for now, it's age based. Primary doctor's gonna tell you everything. The one thing I ask anyone that is afraid of cancer to mention is if you have a family history, you have to talk about it because that's where screening can be sooner or more frequent if it meets certain criteria, which is, primary family members, what age do they have it, what cancer was it, blah, blah,
Okay.
blah. So the exercise, the diet, good sleep is very, 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 very important. As somebody that doesn't sleep enough, but that's shown directly with all kinds of stuff, cancer, everything, because you're elevating your cortisol. The only time you can they basically like change the gas or take out the toxins of your brain and spinal cord, the only time is deep REM. Everything else we eat and all this stuff, our liver, our kidneys take care of it, right? All the time. Nothing excretes the shit in your cerebral spinal fluid than deep REM. And so when you have these like muscle pains, easy cramping, I'm always fatigued, I feel like crap, I low sex drive. Have you had a proper oil change of the fluid around your brain and your spinal cord? And they're like, no, I sleep like shit. I'm like, whatever. I'm like, sleep hygiene.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, how could you get sleep, man? I don't understand. You've got so much going on. Like you're full-time doctor, you're in collaborating with entrepreneur, you're doing medfluencers, you have the scrubs, right?
Yeah.
There's the TikTok, Instagram, podcast. You're talking about two books that you're working on with people right now,
Yeah. Two
collaborating with.
books.
What else do we have? What else is going on? A
And then a
family,
couple of
wife, 3
startups.
kids,
Yeah.
a couple startups.
Yeah.
Okay. Like what else? Give me the run through.
That's probably the thicket of it. Like, I have 3 or 4 startups I'm working like very kind of most passionately in, three, actually all four, I co-founded, and they all came out of something to do with social media, believe it or not, either relationship built or something, all of them.
Wow.
And then
What are they? What are we talking about?
so one is OncoAI with
Okay.
Scott Penberthy, Doug, Nikhil Takakar. He's a huge leader, super humble in radiation oncology. That one is just bringing AI and kind of like, how is it applicable, right? That's why he's the director of applied AI. The other one is MedFluencers. So that I started with Adam Goodkoff. He has like millions of followers. He's been doing social media for a long time, years. Mine was totally serendipitous. Like I had no intent. I didn't even have social media like 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
4 years ago. I had Facebook, but so him and I started MedFluencers to basically make sure that this shit is done responsibly. Like there's so much liability with like medical, degrees and boards, certifications in what state, and it's a very loose, if at all, regulated space. So like creators are taking tons of money, which may not even be legal, for things that aren't necessarily validated and blah, 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 blah. So it's kind of a pain in the ass. Not fun, but it needs to be done because people deserve to get the information in a vetted manner.
Do you think that there has to be some kind of regulation, or do you think that there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. I think if you're flexing your medical degree or knowledge, there should be some form of regulation to make sure you can't just funnel your pockets.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but like Dr. Oz out, right? Like Dr. Oz, many would say, there was a little bit of an abuse of like his medical degree and like his like the trust that was built, and then it was found out that he was making a ton of money to like for a certain product and stuff.
I know
So
the story. Yeah.
yeah, do you know who it is?
I
The
know
20-year-old
who
son?
he is.
Yeah, okay.
I
was like, I feel dated.
No, man.
But so I think there's some responsibility that has to be in line, and then on the flip side, like reimbursement. So a lot of people just want to reimburse doctors, like, oh, we're gonna give you a doctor rate because this is what the rate is as speaker, and I'm like, so you're not paying for the rate of like the years that it took to amass a very refined audience of 500,000 or 2 million people. They don't even include that in what they propose to you.
Yeah.
But you'll go to an actor, you might have someone equally as handsome or attractive. One's going to cost you 10 million. One's going to cost you $100. They look the same. What is it about the other person? It's the visibility. And that has just not been defined when it comes to physicians that are also now, I don't call them celebrities by any means, but at least have a very concentrated target audience. And then you're just compensating them to say, oh, well, you get the rate because you have a medical degree and you speak oncology. It's like, well, what about the 500,000 of cancer people that you pay?
Right.
So that's my
here's the fear that comes up in my mind when I hear that, right? About like regulating what doctors are allowed to say, right? What
not
happens?
say.
Okay.
If you're going to take money.
Oh.
Yeah, like I take almost all my content it's just what I'm saying. That is fine.
Right.
Like then somebody has to do your due diligence because that's just a person. They happen to have a medical degree.
Yeah, but
I'm saying
if
if you're
take money on that. Yeah,
but if you're speaking on something, that's where I think you have to adhere to the same, things that if you were doing a commercial or podcast and stuff. That has not been explored in social media.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, I mean, we have probably over 150 huge creators now. Like if you're on medical TikTok or medical Instagram, hopefully most of them are MedFluencer, because we want to make sure that they know the legalities behind it and stuff, and kind of build a community. It's a very weird niche space.
These communities are, I think, the future. I think it's coming.
Yeah.
I think especially like, okay, I'm at the VU Amsterdam, is the university I'm at in Amsterdam. I love it. It's awesome. They've got this big, campus. Everybody's together. There's more projects going on this campus than I've ever seen in any campus that I've been on. I don't even know about half of them.
Yeah.
Right. They're just in a room somewhere and it's going.
Yeah.
And so I'm part of this podcasting association and everybody's coming together and we're all just getting started. And so I don't know how to do editing and they don't know how to get guests and they're nervous about picking up the phone and calling somebody. And we all just come together and we do co-workings and we teach each other.
Yeah.
And we're doing it together. And then say, I talked to this person. Oh, you got to have him on. He's so cool. And this, and it's linking and it's moving.
Yes.
And it's fun. And I think that you were talking about MedFluencers, right? So say even just you have this information, they just don't know about this part, right? So you just say, oh, link up with this person, done. And that just saved how many hours? Like how much more efficient are we as humanity?
Yeah.
If everybody groups and is able to, share knowledge instantaneously through these communities. And then you really feel like you have a mission when you're sharing it with somebody.
100%.
Like I was doing this with my dad, right? For the thesis. So We got to have 12 interviews. I need it by the 10th, so it's like crunch time. We got to go. And, I'm on number 7 right now. We've got 4 lined up. We're on pace, but we got to keep it moving. Right.
Yeah.
And so he's been helping me out. Who do you know? Who, blah, 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 giving a call. I'm calling, like maybe, David Hammer, the investigative journalist. He's like been in New Orleans for the longest time. He's a family friend of ours, and I hadn't talked to him in 5 years, right? And so like I'm a little nervous picking up the phone. I'm like, all right, screw it, let's go. But when I'm like with my dad and we're talking and his girlfriend's around, like the fact that we're just together on a project, all moving in the same direction, that feels so different than what I could imagine as somebody who's alone in their own house trying to do, I want to be a medical influencer and I'm going to do this project alone. They don't have that shared feedback. It goes back to those, like human like urges and, what responds, what our reward system is, or what,
Yes. You nailed it. I mean, it's like, what inherently, how did we get here? And I was saying this to you earlier today before we set up. I was like, there's nothing that drives me more than responsibility to the people that have taken time to foster me. Like, that drives me way more than what anything for me to just do it for me the next day. It's more like somebody invested time in me. Somebody like shared that, like, and it's not like they expect anything. It's just that it's just when you have all this fostering, this collaboration, it just wills you and pulls you in a way that is I think, I mean, I could never, achieve on my own. Like, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. The reward of linking up two people and having helped that person with that, and the synergism of that person also got help with the other, like, that just feels so good. Not for the credit, but just
Yeah.
because like you got to be a conduit to bring the best version of two different people out of themselves just by linking them up. Like, you got to be a conduit to literally make someone better, or even though you didn't do anything. I learned that from Mika, my mentor. Like, he set me up and introduced me to so many people that, like, well, I can't say so many people, but so many people that were so foundational, or of the foundational people. So many were because of a link up of him.
When did
And
y'all
then
meet?
I started doing that a couple of years ago. And then I started doing that. MedFluencers is built on that. I was like, Adam, you need to meet Mika. So Mika helped Adam a lot. And that's why we built this startup and had a pre-seed round and have revenue in the business. Like, we just, everything is built, and he just did it charitably. Like, so one, always share what you know, or like don't be so selfish with the things that you have been essentially given. Like, I consider myself just a file cabinet of everyone else. Like, that's far greater than me, Like, there's very little of Sanjay. Like, everything else is just a file cabinet of all of these amazing people that just like I just, absorbed. That's all that is. But continue to share that file cabinet with others, and then and foster. And that's what community does. And that's what podcasting and social media and all this stuff does, is it helps you identify and find those groups of like-minded people that are
Right.
just peripherally not as identical, because you don't want them to be identical, but everything in my life today that I feel every day blessed for and responsible to make sure goes outward into the world is a product of networking. And I
Yeah.
hate the word networking because it sounds intentional. It's not that I never even understood it being a doctor, right? In med school and residency, there's no concept of networking.
Mhm.
But what that means is a network is the universe builds a network for you. I think that's the way, but you can't shut yourself off. You just literally have to say, available to come to this register or desk. You just turn the light on, be open to it, and your network is there waiting for you. And
Yeah.
you just have to go, look for it and receive it.
Is there a vision of, where you would like this to go? Like, it seems like you have all of these different projects and they seem to be focused on the collective. Seems like it's about the we more than it's about the I, is
Mhm.
my take.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's driving you in terms of, is it medical advancement? Is it the ability to help people?
Very simply, my like short, I guess, 5 to 10 year goal is to at least make cancer care equal for everybody in the country. Because equal in the sense of, it's not that the doctors aren't smart enough, don't work hard enough. It's just, if you have 10,000 people or 100,000 people in your radius of 60 miles versus 100 people, you're going to be like, there's a different amount asked of you to take care of that community.
Mhm.
There's a severe deficiency of oncologists in this country. So the fact that it doesn't matter what you make, or your, skin does influence for the worse, unfortunately, the color. But the point is, you could be a totally good person giving a lot to the community and everything, but just if you're in a community that's a desert and you don't have an oncologist that's an academician, that's like a specialist in that particular cancer type, which is 85% of Americans, they have a general oncologist like me.
Yeah.
Like this is me, right? I'm a general oncologist. That care is different, even though the insurance is the same and everything, than somebody that only does ER positive, estrogen positive breast cancer.
Right.
But we just can't have enough of those. So what I want to do in an ideal world, I don't care if it's me, if it's an avatar of me, like it's nothing about Sanjay Juneja. Like if there's an avatar that went viral, that my voice or whatever, like it's not for the clout. It's just that if we can keep getting this information out there, that's somebody's mom or dad or daughter or son. And you see thousands of comments like that on my podcast and messages now because of your video. They finally ordered a colonoscopy because my dad was iron deficient. They never ordered it. They said it was mild, and they found an early colon cancer. You see tons of those because of your video. Like we weren't offered CAR T therapy, or we didn't know that whatever. This is Americans. That doesn't feel good. That makes me sick. And that's the burden of responsibility where I'm like, I constantly tell my wife and stuff. I'm like, I haven't posted in like 2 or 3 weeks. It's not to like for cloud or likes or follows. It's I'm like because there's a sea of people that could have optimized improved care, and just because of a very imperfect healthcare system, it's insane. But social media and podcasting can at least be a band-aid for that individual's life.
Yeah.
Like you're going to make a different outcome. Oh, I didn't know there was a better, cleaner version of this treatment or drug. I got a podcast because it was been approved for a year, only a year, but a year. We know it takes years for sometimes it to trickle down into certain parts of America. That's my goal.
And if you could, what's the path to get there? What does that look like?
I think the couple of startups that I'm in, they all revolve around that. How
Mhm.
do we democratize? How do we just make it equal? I don't mean
Yeah.
like somebody that has more money, like because it's all. I'm talking even if you have everyone has insurance, so it's insurance coverage regardless.
It seems like it would have to involve technology in some way.
Big time. That's why I'm working with the AI guys
Yeah.
and gals. That's why MedFluencers on social media and digital media. And then some automation tools to be able to help. And then I'm also trying to help with marketing and messaging for pharma, not for a paycheck, but because there are drugs that are more efficacious or have replaced some of the older drugs that aren't just being used because the doctor doesn't know about it. So I'm like, you got to fix your marketing because like
Yeah.
you have less death with your drug than the one that everyone's using. Why are you not? Why don't people know that? Right. And so in a weird way, I don't have any messaging marketing experience in the past, but I've learned it very well because that's a lot of what social media is and podcasting. What's the hook? How do you keep attention? Whatever. In a weird way, and then I also have 3 board specialties. I'm able to know what a doctor needs to hear, a
Yeah.
busy community oncologist, in 9 seconds because I do social media and podcasting. And so I've like learned this. This company is called Marikai Health, where I found out this tech guru that does like the Sundance Film Festivals online. Like he does their entire film annual festival on the tech side and a bunch of other stuff. I'm like, help me help people get information out that have better, cleaner drugs that aren't just like known about. So that's America. So all of these things revolve around the same thing. Get people the best care for their loved one. It's sickening in today's world that it's not equal, and it's not. That's a fact.
Well, Dr. Janeja, I'm a fan. Thank you
Oh
so much for taking the time. Like, I'm gonna pay it back someday,
no.
pay it forward to the
Yeah,
next
pay it
person.
forward. I
And
love that you said that. It's not pay someone back. It's make sure you pay forward what someone like put in, into you or whatever you learn from something. I feel obliged for the rest of my life to pay forward what anyone that's like given me, a relationship or any opportunity. Like that's like to pay forward and pay them back if I can. But like forward.
pay it forward.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Dude, of course, man.